I wanted to bring on next one of the top business minds in these United States, Bob Nardelli. Many of you who are regular listeners of the More Money Show know that I've had on Bob multiple times because he's got his finger on the pulse of what's happening with the labor market, with business conditions, and his resume. I could spend the rest of the hour talking about this man's accomplishments, but he was the CEO at one point of Home Depot. He was the CEO at one point of Chrysler, helped rebuild that company. He was number 2 or 3 in the chain of command under Jack Welch at GE during the golden age of General Electric. And by the way, you all know Bob from his multiple appearances on Fox News and Fox Business News. Bob Nardelli, I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, and thanks for joining.
Steve, thank you very much. You're always so kind, and it's always my pleasure to be on with you. And equally, your appearances. I don't know when you sleep, Steve. Every time I'm on TV, I see you.
Well, right back to you, my friend. So a lot to talk about. Let's talk about the good things to come. First of all, I mean, I'm very bullish on Trump. I think you share my bullishness on Trump's policies. I don't agree with all his policies, but I agree with the vast majority of them. Can a president, let me put it like this, because you have the perspective of a CEO. Do you think the president can change the direction of a country economically?
Yeah. So, Steve, as you said, I've been very blessed to work with Fortune 500 CEOs, middle market, lower middle market families. And, a recent survey, and certainly my polling, is, the people that were pessimistic have moved more to the middle.
Yeah,
those that were like you, more optimistic, have become very optimistic. And again, you see it in so many, whether it's business forecast for 25, whether you talk about capital allocation, whether you talk about M&A, IPOs, there just seems to be an enthusiasm and an energy in our country that I haven't seen before. And, proof positive is when the president was over in Notre Dame and the world leaders were clustering.
Right, I remember.
Attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got Trudeau flying down overnight to talk with him. So I haven't seen that for a long time. And I just, what I love about President Trump is a promise made is a promise kept. And if he's able to get those through in the next 2 years, and I say 2 years because, we don't want to take the risk on the House. And so we got to get things done quickly and expeditiously with a level of, be very intentional about our strategy, Steve.
So you of all people understand that leadership counts, and we have a man who is a businessman who will be running our country from the presidency, not a career politician, which has been the case with, so many of our modern presidents. And I just think that brings a different perspective about how things work.
Yeah. Listen, there's no question the business acumen that he has developed over his career, and he's been in some really tough industries. You talk about construction and
real estate,
and what he's done, not only nationally, but internationally, in his understanding of economics, and certainly with your tutelage, you and Arts, has been extremely helpful. I'm sure if I had the benefit of your knowledge and your coaching, I probably would have done a better job, Steve.
Well, by the way, let me just say something. First of all, thank you. That's a very complimentary thing to say. But I have to tell you, from the first time I met Donald Trump, and many of my regular listeners have heard me tell this story. But when Arthur Laffer and I went in, that was my first meeting was actually with Larry Kudlow and the president. And I have to tell you, Bob, I went into that room in January of 2016, having a negative opinion of Donald Trump. I just didn't like. I thought he was kind of full of it. I thought it was all self-promotion, and so we went in the room. We spent an hour and a half with him, just the three of us, by the way, just talking. And I came out, and I swear to God, Bob, this is a true story. Larry and I, we had our jaws open. We looked at each other. My God, that guy's going to be the next president of the United States. I mean, and the reason I bring that up is, we talked to him at length about the economy. and click, click, click. He just got it. He just understood everything we were talking about. So, when people say, oh, you guys are such great economic advice to Trump, the truth is Trump doesn't need a lot of economic advice because he knows instinctively the right thing to do.
Yeah. Steve, I would say the oxygen there's oxygen back in the room now compared to where we've been the last 4 years. It's just been so draining, and I don't know where you start, but there's so many missteps and debacle decisions. It's just going to be so refreshing to have a business leader there who can, not only drive our economy, but has a level of globality to him that's going to be very impactful.
One thing I find fascinating, Bob, and I'm talking to Bob Nardelli, who's the great CEO of so many great companies in America. He served as number 2 or 3 in command at GE. He was the CEO of Home Depot. He was the CEO of Chrysler. And now you're a magnificent investor in companies as well. But Bob, can you explain to me, at first, when Trump ran for president in 2016 and throughout a lot of his, presidency in his first term, your colleagues who are CEOs of major companies were very skeptical of Trump. They were very tough on Trump, and a lot of them didn't like him very much and criticized him very much publicly. This time around, it's totally different. I mean, when you have the CEO of Facebook and Zuckerberg, and you've got Jeff Bezos and the people at Google all saying this guy's great, he's going to do the right thing. What happened? How is it these people went from being opponents to him to really seeing the light?
Isn't it amazing how quickly the reality of the Trump train has evolved, Steve? I mean, people that in some of the names you mentioned, I know and have had dinner at their homes, and you couldn't be more correct that these are individuals that have gone for 180. And when you look at the contribution, I mean, I don't think I've ever had a president, soon to be president, have kind of kickstart his library already with $15 million. That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Right. Well, he's got a lot to do before he has his presidential library because we got 4 good years ahead.
I know, but to think of, I mean, usually that's something you do at the end of your term, not the beginning. But yeah, it's interesting, the $1 million contributions. But what's more interesting is not the amount, it's the people. And I hope that continues through his term, Steve, don't you? Because it's important that we all come together and come up with the best solution, whether it's on AI technology, certainly gaining our energy independence back. His comments to Europe now about LNG and being able to buy energy from us versus what's going on over there now, particularly with Germany. So I just think, you just go down the list of things that he's focused on, return to energy independence, right? Make sure that we close the border. And as Tom has said so many times, the new cabinet, the worst goes first. And I support that totally. Even if the tariffs that result in us being able to do that hurt us a little bit. Look, we've lived with 9.1% or more the last 4 years. And when I trade off safety and security for my children and my grandchildren, I'm willing to pay a little bit more if I have to in trade until we get this border closed, Steve, in my opinion.
So the next thing I wanted to ask you about, Bob Nardelli, is we had something in our hotline the other day, and for folks who are not getting that, why aren't you getting it? It's free. Just go to unleashprosperity.com and get our daily email called The Hotline, and it summarizes what's going on very concisely in the economy and business and in politics. But we had a feature a few days ago about the fact that the United States of America and our great companies, many of which you have led, are just hitting it out of the park. One statistic I saw from Bloomberg, and I don't know if this is precisely true, but it's probably close to being true, is that 60% of all the equity, Bob, in all the companies in the world, 60% of those companies are domiciled here in the United States of America, we're just killing it. And obviously, 7 of the 8 top technology companies are here in America. And, there's so many factors here about why that is. That, by the way, we are 5 or 6% of the population, and we have 60% of the wealth. That's pretty amazing accomplishment. give me, as someone who's led some of these great companies, what do you think the factors are that have led to this greatness of America and our supremacy in technology and finance and banking and retail? I mean, you were in retail. So what makes America so special?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things, Steve, and it's a great question. If I can, just before that, I you have financial advisors, and they say, well, you got to have, a good blend and offshore and emerging. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Why do I need to do that? Isn't Caterpillar quite a bit of offshore? Isn't Coca-Cola a lot of bit of offshore? So I don't need to invest. I don't need to put my money offshore. I just need to put my money in the American, these U.S.-based companies that have international stretch, and I'll be just happy there because I know them, I know their policies, I know their ethics, I know a lot more about them. So that's number one. But I think you ripped off 4 or 5 reasons why, because you either innovate or you evaporate in today's market, and speed of implementation is the biggest competitive advantage you have. And so we've got brilliant people, we've got great capital allocations. We thrive on innovation, and I just think that the more we do that, the better we will become. And under this president, I think he's going to be our biggest supporter and our biggest cheerleader to make sure companies that have kind of laid back over the last 4 years are going to spring into action, Steve. I believe that from the bottom of my heart.
So you were talking about innovation and investment, which brings me to the tax cut, because one of the things we tried to accomplish with some success in that Trump tax cut, which you and I want to make permanent, was we allowed businesses to immediately write off a lot of their R&D expenses when they bought capital equipment. So that incentivized them to do more of it. We also cut the tax rates in order to get, more innovation. And it seemed to have worked. Do you think tax policy plays a role?
Tremendous role. And one of the companies that I participate in and advise is they were dormant on the R&D credits that you and Art put in place. And so I basically go around and encourage people to look at that and understand how you could, within the policies, by reporting and tracking, you can get tremendous advantage. The other thing that's critical on these tax cuts from the business standpoint, certainly the middle to lower middle market companies, these family-owned businesses, I just can't imagine losing the tax credits, the benefits that they have today, and seeing that increase. Steve, that will just, they're already struggling with some, supply chain inflation as a result of this last 4 years, but that would just be a heck of a damper on their viability going forward. So I can't encourage you and Art and certainly the president to push these things through. And I know Congress is trying this game of trying to not allow for raising the level of debt, which won't unless you get that, you're not going to be able to do these tax things. And all of us out here need to understand that little rope-a-dope trick that they're trying on you, Steve.
Yeah, it's a great point. Well, we got to make that tax cut permanent. One last question, Bob, and then I'll let you go. I'm talking to the great Bob Nardelli, one of America's great CEOs. I spoke a week or two ago at a big CEO summit that Yale puts on in New York City, and there must have been, 40 of the top 100 CEOs in that room. And it was a very illuminating experience for me. I was very honored to be there. I'm not a CEO, but one of the things that struck me in talking to a lot of these men and women who run great companies, and almost all of them were American companies, is so many of them were actually not born in the United States. They were immigrants, people who came here. I mean, I sat next to the CEO of Citibank, and she's British, and there was another gentleman sitting 2 seats to me to the right, and he was from Thailand. Another one was from India. And it just seems to me that immigration is part of this innovation process and our entrepreneurial spirit. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
I do. And first of all, I read some glowing reports from Jeff, who puts that program on for Yale, about you and the participation in the CEOs there. So thank you for being there. It's
I didn't know you knew about it. It was a wonderful thing. I learned a lot from the CEOs, and I spoke for about 10 minutes, but it was great. But anyway, so what do you think?
Yeah. Well, remember, I'm one of your biggest followers now, so I keep track of you, you know?
It's an honor.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah. So here's what I think about that. And I've tried to run all these companies the same way. You know, when you talk about diversity, it's not only ethnicity and gender, it's diversity of thought. It's diversity of experience.
Yes.
And what you just articulated was that. And so, you know, I don't care where I can get the best ideas, where I can get the most influential leaders, people that can build a culture of how to versus why not, and whether they come from India or all the countries you named. I'm more than happy to put those on my team, and more importantly, Steve, put them on the field and you know, put them in as the coach and let them play, because they bring tremendous vitality. They bring new ideas. They're not encumbered with the past. Toughest thing to change is what you put in place, and that's why sometimes it's better. You with me, Steve? To change the coach or the quarterback, because you get a refresh, if I can say it that way. And so that's what you've articulated, and I think that's why it works so well, Steve.
So, Bob, can I hold you on for just one or two more quick questions, Bob? I know I told you just okay, because by the way, my producers yell at me and say we got a break for commercial, but I got to ask you about this, and we're just going to hold back on the ads for a minute. So, you know, one of the things you mentioned that, you know, we were talking about that meeting that I spoke at, and I'll tell you what I said to these CEOs, and I thought they might kick me out of the room for saying it, but I said, I hate to tell you this, but a lot of you CEOs have been out of touch with, you know, middle-class Trump-type voters, the people who push Trump over the goal line, because, and I mentioned the thing like, you know, the Bud Light commercial, you know, which one I'm talking about, that cost, you know, Budweiser $40 billion because they insulted their, you know, their customers. And I said, look, you CEOs have to move away from the left, because this is not a center-left country. This is a center-right country, and pay attention to what's happening in America. Stop with the DEI and the you know, all of the ESG stuff, and listen to what Americans are saying, because I think that's why Trump won. He understands these folks more than they do. And I can't tell you how many of these folks came up to me afterwards and said, Steve, you know, you're right. We've been kind of wrong on this. And I just wonder if you have any observation about that.
I have. Let me share some practices. So, you know, I always believed in market focus and customer centric. And when I was at Home Depot, I'd walk a couple hundred stores a year because I wanted to make sure I got unfiltered feedback of what the customers were saying or doing in the store. When I was running Chrysler, I made it mandatory that our executive team would go over to the call center and listen to the complaints, because you know, I wanted to make sure they were hearing what our actual customers were experiencing unfiltered, right? So we would listen in, and you know, this problem, that problem. So they couldn't be quite as arrogant and condescending about how good they were when you got customer complaints, and therefore we had to be very sensitive and very responsive. And I think there's some companies out there, you mentioned one, there's another one that just maybe had a misstep, another car company had a misstep, but I think having that day-to-day interaction, and that's what this president does. He's shaking hands, he's out there, you know, among us, and really reading customer centricity and trying to respond to it. So I think it's very, very important what you said, and I'm glad to hear those CEOs responded that way, Steve.
Well, I think you're spot on, sir. I mean, you know, when we put out our hotline and we get a lot of mail back, and my you know, guys who work for me say, you don't have to read through all the comments. And I say, yes, I do. I want to know what people are saying. And we get, you know, a lot of positive, but we get a lot, Steve, you were wrong on this, you're wrong on that. And it makes me think about, well, maybe I am wrong about this. I'm not always right. And so I think that's a really great point. You got to listen to your customers.
Yeah. It's like when you go outside in the winter with a lot of coats and sweaters, you really don't know the temperature till you start taking them off. And that's what it means being closer to the customer, Steve.
Amen. Well, Bob Nardelli, thank you. I could talk to you for another hour. I so much appreciate it. Could you come on again sometime in the near future and we'll finish this conversation?
It'd be my honor. It'd be my honor, Steve. Thank you.
That's Bob Nardelli.
Eden Memorial Chapels understands Jewish funerals can take many forms. Some are Orthodox, while others are more conservative or of a Reformed nature. There's no one better. With services close to all New York and New Jersey cemeteries, Eden Memorial Chapels offer fair and balanced pricing and can provide easy transfer of you and your loved ones to Israel. While you're grieving, they're here to take care of all the details so that you deal with less bureaucracy and have more peace of mind. Go to EdenMemorial.com. That's EdenMemorial.com.